Okay, good afternoon. Let's get started. First of all, welcome to this book launch event for this book we just published for the Asian Law Society reader. My name is Liu Sida. I'm a professor here at the Hong Kong U Faculty of Law, and I'm the third author, one of the co-authors for this book. And today we're very honored to have some very distinguished speakers and also my distinguished co-author here to talk about the book together. And I hope this will be a more informal discussion, so we welcome any questions from the audience, either in the room or from online. I know we have at least more than 50 or 60 people listening online right now. So first, let me introduce the speakers today. First, I want to introduce my co-author, Professor Lynette Chua from the National University of Singapore Faculty of Law. In the flyer you saw, Lynette was title was associate professor, but she was actually recently promoted to full professor. So and then of course we have five very distinguished commentators, which will do some critiques on the book, I hope. So first of all, we have Professor Weidong, the University Professor of Humanity and Social Sciences at Shanghai Jiao University. And also the president of the China Institute for Socio-Legal Studies. And then next to Professor Ji is Professor He Jin, my colleague here at the Hong Kong U Faculty of Law. And then Professor Miao from Chinese University of Hong Kong Faculty of Law. And then next is Professor Peter Wang Shucheng from the CityU University of Hong Kong Faculty of Law. And then we have Professor Jianhua, who's the department head of the Department of Sociology at the University of Macau. So it's really an exciting gathering of all the law society scholars in the Great Bay Area, I would say, right, the Hong Kong Macau region, because for many of us, we've been in touch for various things over email, over Zoom for the past 2 years. So this is I think finally we have the opportunity to have everybody together, have the in-person gathering. So I'm very excited about that. So here's how we would like to proceed. So first, I would invite my co-author, Professor Lynette Chua, to give a kind of a snapshot of the book, some background, and what's our intention for writing the book and what kind of audience we're trying to reach. And then I will also say a few words about kind of the chapter outline and the main themes. And then we will turn it over to our five speakers for critiques. Yeah, Lynette, over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you to the Hong Kong University Faculty of Law for organizing the event, and to Dean Ling for supporting the event as well. And of course, very honored that we have all these professors here to read our book and critique. What I'll do is I'll just briefly share with you the motivation that we had for putting together this reader, which we chose for the title, The Asian Law and Society Reader. The idea germinated in 2017. At the time, I had been teaching law and society courses at National University of Singapore Faculty of Law for about 5-6 years. And I find myself every time when I try to update my syllabus or create a new syllabus on a course related to law and society, I would feel a little bit frustrated because although I know a lot of law and society literature, I realized that my training was very much based on American law and society. And teaching in Singapore, I wanted my students to have a lot more exposure and to help them think along law and society issues based on societies that they grew up in or are more familiar with in the region. So I always find myself spending quite a lot of time scouring relevant literature on law and society that will complement the literature that I was very familiar with in my US training. So I thought, why don't I just come up with the idea of putting together a law and society reader that will help myself. So David Engel and I had collaborated on various issues in the past, various projects. So I asked if he would be interested. Intellectually, this was a very interesting project, but both of us were wondering if there was really an audience or a readership for it. And as things moved along, we were talking to Cambridge University Press about putting together the volume. We then realized that actually there is a growth and development of law and society literature and interest in the Asian region. the Asian Law and Society Journal, which Professor Ji oversees over in Shanghai. There's the growing Law and Society, Asian Law and Society Association, and you see a lot of panels at Law and Society meeting about research topics and questions that originate or are based in Asian context. So as along the way, we realized that there might be actually a readership for it. And also along the way, we thought we found a very willing and a wonderful collaborator in Sida. So we brought him along in 2018. And so here we are. We worked through COVID. It was quite a tough time putting together the material. So I think it took longer than we expected, but I'm glad that finally in 2023, so about 6-7 years since the idea came around, that we're able to be here here to talk about. So now I'll turn it over to Sida to share the basic outline of the book.
Thank you, Lynette. I must say that although all the three of us are co-authors, the book will probably still happen without me, but it will never happen without Lynette, because she's the person who actually came up with the idea and really get us going with this project. So as Lynette mentioned, this is kind of our COVID project. So we spent a lot of time actually during isolation, quarantine, thinking about how to put the hundreds, if not thousands of materials together potentially, and pick a selection and then put them into different chapters, which is actually a more daunting task than we originally expected. Because for some topics there are a lot of scholarships, and for other topics we think are quite important, but actually not a lot of topics. And also, if you look at the country representation, we really hope to achieve kind of a not necessarily a random sample, but at least a certain kind of representation of different parts of Asia. Not just East Asia or South Asia, but actually also Southeast Asia, Central Asia. Really different parts of the region. And so that's also very challenging, because for some countries like China or Japan, there are actually a lot of writings. Like for other smaller countries in Southeast Asia or other places, there might not be a lot of writings. So we did our best to try to achieve both the geographic diversity and also in terms of topics. So we eventually decided to organize the book into 9 chapters. Of course, we have a very substantive introduction, which is laying out what we think is Asian law and society as a field, which is not exactly 100% the same as the American law society or law society in other parts of the world. Right? But after that, we have 9 chapters. We have a chapter on religion. This is our first chapter. We'll put religions in the first chapter because we thought, especially for the Asian context, religion is absolutely central, no matter which religion we're talking about here. And then we have 3 chapters on legal pluralism, disputing, and legal consciousness. And these are all classic topics, of course, in the law and society scholarship internationally, but also in Asia as well. And then, of course, we have legal mobilization after legal consciousness. These are two very closely related themes. And then we have 3 chapters on legal profession course and criminal justice. These are we think 3 major domains in which, if you want to study law in action, these are the major sites that these law in action. And finally, we have our last chapter, chapter 9, is called research methodology. So that's where we kind of try to reflect the different kind of methods, research methods, either single method or mixed method, that researcher has used to study different kind of legal phenomena in different Asian contexts. And we also reflected a little bit about, for example, the challenges of digitalization and all these kinds of things. So those are the 9 chapters. And before I stop, I also kind of want to briefly mention, there are also actually, as we were doing the book, there are 5 theoretical themes we think are quite important. We originally thought about putting some of the themes as chapters. Then we decided these 5 themes are too important. So it's better to actually, spread them out into almost each individual chapter. So the 5 themes are colonialism, legal and political transformations, hierarchy and power, rights and identities. These are all kind of cross-cutting themes that you see in almost every chapter through different readings in different countries. I don't want to go forever, so for the sake of time, I'll just give, for example, a snapshot about the importance of colonialism. right? So as you can see, I mean, a lot of Asian countries were jurisdictions were, used to be colonial society, now post-colonial society, including Hong Kong, has a strong colonial legacy, right? So how to make sense of these colonial legacies and how these kind of colonial and post-colonial societies actually develop their legal systems and develop their legal professions, for example, develop their particular understanding of rights and legal consciousness, and develop a certain kind of dispute resolution system. I think that's actually something that you can never avoid, no matter what topic you study in the Asian context. Colonialism is very important. I can go on to talk about the other 4 themes, but I think we better use the time to hear comments from our speakers. So I'll stop here. I'll turn it over to Professor Weidong. And Professor Ji will speak in Chinese because I think that's better, more effective for him to deliver his very deep thoughts on these topics.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here because my spoken English is not so good to express my opinions with the facility. I would like to make my comment in Mandarin. 我是在日本留学和接受法社会学训练的，那个是在80年代中期，然后呢，91年的时候在阿姆斯特丹，当时呢就是美国的法语社会协会和这个欧洲的法社会学研究会举行第一次这个 joint conference， 当时我也很有幸参加了。那么回到国内呢，刚才这个柯欣教授、布达教授也介绍了，我们在国内呢也在推动法语社会方面的研究。这本书呢，我觉得是非常有价值的，因为我们知道在进入21世纪之后啊，亚洲的发展非常快。那么我们如何理解和把握亚洲的法语社会变迁，这是一个世界性的课题。当然就是亚洲啊，它最大的特点是什么？虽然我们用一个词儿来说亚洲，其实这是远远不够的。亚洲最大的特点是多样性，无论是宗教、文化、意识形态、国家体制、发展模式的这个采纳，全部是多样化的。我们可以说，世界上所有的宗教、所有的意识形态、所有的国家体制，我们都可以在亚洲找到它的样本。那这样一个庞大的、非常复杂的这个亚洲地区，如何形成秩序，如何推动社会变迁，确实是一个非常重要的问题。所以我觉得这本书呢是非常好的抓住了多元主义这样一个亚洲特征，然后从这个角度呢，向外国的学者解释亚洲的法语社会为什么是这样，向亚洲的法语社会研究者提供了一个非常好的入门想法。我觉得这本书呢，不仅对于大学的教材是非常重要的，对于在亚洲的法语社会研究以及法社会学研究亚洲问题，都是一个非常好的想法。刚才苏达教授已经全面介绍了9章的这个内容啊，我自己特别感兴趣的是第4章，就是法律意识这一块。因为我们在亚洲啊，我们从法社会学的角度来看，一个最大的问题是西方的制度，无论是通过殖民地的方式也好，还是通过这个就是本民族崛起的过程中自己导入的样。那么在这个过程中面临的一个最大的问题，就是现代式的法律制度，它和传统的文化之间如何契合，这是一个非常大的问题。那么首先在亚洲的话，日本首先是碰到这个问题，所以他们对这个法律意识的问题是非常关注的。当然我们知道从安律师开始，他们就已经关注到法律意识的重要性，但是把法律意识作为一个专门的研究对象，作为一个领域来加以研究的话，我觉得是日本学者的贡献。那么大家可能都在这本书中也体现出来了，川岛武明教授提出来了他的特有的关于发展与法律意识的模式，然后进行了大规模的实证研究。我本人也对这一块特别感兴趣。首先因为在日本嘛， 那么我刚到日本留学的时候，正好中国刚刚改革开放，所以特别关注的就是法律现代化、法律与社会变迁、法律与改革这样一些课题。那在这个过程中，就会碰到为什么我们导入的现代制度在社会中会发生扭曲，不一定起到它的作用。那这个时候呢，就觉得日本的关于法律意识的这个研究，觉得是非常有意义、非常有启发的。当然，我在日本的时候也和日本的一些法社会学者共同做过一些法律意识方面的调查，比如说契约意识，我们当时呢到香港、到台湾也做了。那我也很关注啊，因为都是这个所谓的这个中国人的社会，我们的传统文化是一致的，但是由于后面的法律制度还有这个经济体制不一样，后来就会发生一些很大的变化。那这个在法律意识上究竟会有什么样的反应？这是非常有趣的问题。所以我觉得这个题目很重要，而且会涉及到其他的各章，包括法律动员，包括纠纷解决、法院、法律职业律师等等，都和这个问题有关。特别我们从亚洲来看的话，这个问题是非常关键的。我认为就是蔡可欣教授和 David Enger 教授呢，关于法律意识的这个在亚洲的这个研究的分享非常到位。那个举出来了3种流派，对吧？那么当然它这个是首先是一般性的来讲，那我们可以看到，一个是呢，我们强调法律意识呢，往往会关注传统的 identity， 会注重自我认知的问题。第二个呢，当然就是涉及到就是如何在维护个人权利方面与国家与政府之间产生的这个张力。然后第三个呢，就是如何动员法律来推动改革，维护自己的权利。那么他们两个的评论呢，我觉得非常到位。就是在亚洲的话，我们看法律意识，他关注的是第1点和第3点，中间的这一块，相对来说，就是个人与国家之间的张力啊，在亚洲看的不明显。亚洲各个国家呀，相对来说权威主义色彩更浓，而且大家更愿意用国家与个人统一的这样一个观点来把握。那么这个时候当然会有不同的看法。那么这个呢是一个非常重要的特点。我觉得指出这样的特点呢，对我们来说是非常有启示意义的。所以我想呢，就是通过这本书，从法律意识的这样的文献梳理，对于我们今后思考中国的这个进一步的改革。然后呢，中国的法治现在你看，大陆内地也在不断的强调法治中国的建设，但是我们总觉得好像跟我们想象的这个法治不太一样。那这个实际上就涉及到这个法律意识的问题。当然，我们知道日本呢曾经提示过一个关于法律意识的研究的模型，包括法律知识、法律概念和这个法律观念等等啊。这个模式呢，我觉得对于我们研究法律意识确实是很有意义的。那么我想呢，这本书中相关的章节对这些问题啊都做了一个很好的说明。如果有机会的话，我也很愿意与港大的老师和同学们合作，我们也许可以推动这个两岸3地、两岸4地的法律意识的研究，共同研究。这样的话，我们看出来，在这个进入21世纪之后，两岸4地的法律意识究竟有什么样的不一样，有什么样的变化？这是一个非常有趣的问题。如果这个做好了，也许就是中国法社会学者对亚洲、对世界的这个法社会学研究的一个重要的贡献。我认为它是具有世界意义的。我就讲这些，谢谢。
I just want to echo Technology's operations to co-authors and Professor David Enger as well for this very comprehensive, very insightful collection of law and society works in Asia. As many, many colleagues here today, I think we taught law and society for a long time, and we are always struggling with finding appropriate teaching materials. So when we have, there are some textbooks on American law and society and international law and society in general, but they are not really applicable to our own context. There might be some sporadic articles or books on topics in China and in other neighboring countries. But actually, we always struggling with, like, I mean, where to find a textbook. We end up, like, I mean, always sending our students a lot of those articles, sometimes changing all the time. So now I think this book actually filled the gap. Right? So we are not comfortably to say, hey, this is really very nice, very useful book for students. And next semester, maybe I can just use that, and then there will be a lot of trouble. So that's the first thing. And that more importantly, this is an effort really try to go beyond what I call Anglo-American centric tendency in Royal Society. That is true. Like, I mean, really movement in North America, and then inevitably, I mean, scholars there try to focus on their legal systems. There are also some research, on European countries, some on Japan, maybe, like, so when I was studying the course, like, I mean, 10 years ago, right? But there are not many. There are not many on Asian countries, and then at least we don't know much. Right? So we don't know, like, I mean, what happened in Vietnam, even though my hometown is located, like, I mean, only less than 100 miles from Vietnam, right? So we know nothing about how the laws implemented, how people think about law, so how the laborers think about law, the achievement of the state, this kind of thing. And so we know very little about what happened in Indonesia, in India, right? So in Thailand, even though I visit Thailand as a tourist, only after we read David Engel's book on legal consciousness, what he had done at Chiang Mai University, and oh my God, this is just a lot of similarities, and it's really interesting, at least for a lot of Buddhism followers in China, in Tibet. So all those things indeed offer, like, I mean, what Ji has said. Asia is a very diversified society with a lot of different history, different culture, different political institutions. So that it's really important to go beyond the American-centric model and then see the diversity in those countries. And then we learn so much in this process. Right. So that's the first point I want to make. But the second point is that the book has a lot of themes. Right? So Sida has already introduced some of them, and then in particular, Jiao, Professor Ji also made legal consciousness. I happen to teach, I mean, a lot of credit, right? Here I want to just emphasize the chapter on religion. Right? So in a way, I never thought a Royal Society reader would use religion as a topic. I thought that I indeed the title of the first chapter. Right? So and then I look at it, I mean, and find it many interesting stuff, like, I mean, religion. Of course, I mean, China has some religion, has some exposure to that, but there are other things, and other very interesting work on that topic. So there are religions in Thailand, as I mentioned, Indonesia, also in very minority inside China, materialist work. So all those things provide a very good starting point for us to do research on religion and particularly try to understand it comparatively. So here, this is the Richard Lee, like, I mean, my PhD student, I see, I mean, he does exactly the topic. Okay? So he does, I mean, try to understand what Christians in China think about law and illegality when their church demolished. Right? So at the very beginning, they support the state movement. Right? I think this is just following the law, and that's fine. But once the cross was destroyed, right? So the cross was destroyed, and then the Christians think otherwise. They turn their cooperative and supporting position into a different approach, right? So and stage protesting one way or another, right? So those protests, I mean, it seems to be fascinating and somehow unique in China. But you will be more helpful if it is constituted in a more comparative way to compare with other Christian protesting or sectarian regime and what the different type of regime will think about the issue. Like how the Christian will think differently from a Buddhist, like I mean from normal average people who are labeled as atheists. So and then also Islamic people as well. So then and the book will provide a very very good entry point to understand the issue. Right? So it will be extremely helpful. And in addition, I want to stress that I mean for readers like that, usually people don't come up with the other work, but the authors here actually do the introduction themselves. They wrote like I mean doing all this description and introduction, and then also impose some questions. I think that's really laudable. If I were the author, I doubt it would be much easier just to collect a lot of works of others. That's the second point. The third point I want to make is that I'm a little bit curious how you guys think about the structure of the book. Right? So there are many topics. Like I mean, you have addressed subject, religion, for example, criminal justice, court, legal profession, for example. So, but there are also, I mean, those are the or what I call the substantive topic in the legal process, whether it is the legal institution or the agent, right? So, but on the other hand, you also have some very unique law society approach, like in which it seems to be very general, such as building process, legal pluralism, legal mobilization, legal consciousness. That all those things are unfortunately intertwined, right? So, so if you just pick the topic, legal pluralism, so you can be applied in legal profession, also in court, right? And in addition to that, I mean, you also have a chapter on the methodology, right? So the Sida, this chapter like talk about the current mode of data collection, etc. Right? So in a way, you see a mix of the unique law society approach topic, and then also the topics on substantive legal process, legal institution, or legal actors. So logically, I have some. I mean, I may be wondering, like I mean, how exactly you come up with those topics, and then how I mean, of course, it's very difficult. I have looked at a lot of law society leaders, and then it's really difficult to have a coherent, consistent structure. So because by that center, you have court, you have legal profession. You will also have these other legal institutions. Like I mean, you have criminal justice. Weidong have a civil justice, administrative justice. Like I mean, there are many other parallel topics which shall also get attention, but actually it's not there. And then on the other hand, you have the law society approach. You talk about study, talk about legal pluralism, but you also talk about discourse, law and language, right? So law and psychology. There are other parallel topics are there, and then which may also be included if following that. Right? But anyway, so that's just a comment. I know things that are quite extremely difficult. I mean, to have a coherent structure, simply because this is such a broad field, and then Asia in particular is so diversified, but that book will provide a guide for us on how to structure and organize things. And if one day I putting together one society leaders in China. I think I'll find a lot of it in the book. Thank you.
Sure. We'll just go clockwise.
All right. Thank you so much. First, thank you so much for the invitation. I treat this an opportunity not for commenting but also learning. It's, I think, different from all these distinguished speakers. I am a latecomer to the field of learned society research. So my interest started in the field of criminal law, and then I moved to criminology. That was my DPhil in Oxford, and then I felt the traditional toolkit which I had was doctrinal law or international comparative law was not sufficient for me to broaden my horizon and also to basically extend my research interest to many other interesting fields. And then law and society research, its intellectual appeal instantly grabbed my attention. It looks like it's a home for my next generation of research. That's how I came to grow a really strong interest in the field. And actually, I was talking with Grace before because I presented a kind of slide for for the talk.
Sorry about that.
Not at all. I am doing this because I think this is a good learning process. I'm feeding myself inspiration. And I think I'm going to be very brief about this. So I first want to echo both what Professor Ji and Frank said before. I think this is a very valuable addition to what we already had, the tons of brilliant research in law and society in Asia. And of course, it has a really intelligent design and selection of many interesting research in the field. Professor Ji said this is the best introductory guide for Asian law and society research and education. I agree completely. And I think we are always talking about ChatGPT, etc., AI nowadays. So I'm thinking if we feed ChatGPT with this book and many other selective writing of the distinguished speakers in the room, maybe it will achieve the level of equivalent to doctoral or master degree already. So that is my understanding of the importance of this book. And also, I think Professor Darian Smith said this book has been elegantly structured. So that is the point I want to echo Frank's comment about how these two things come together. One is the different chapters, and the other is the different, what is you call the meta cross-cutting themes. Okay. So for me, I think the three chapters I have most interested in is legal mobilization, court, and criminal justice. But I'm not going to talk all of them because I'm not going to talk forever in the interest of time. But I want to mention very briefly in the chapter of crime and justice, I'm pretty Jianhua, who is a leading authority in Asia. In this field, we have a lot to comment on this as well. So in this chapter, you have three sections. The first section is punishment. Second section is justice. Third section is criminal process. And in particularly the first and second section, I saw there is a representative of at least 5 different articles. And I studied them, the articles, as a type of research. I then found, for example, the first article was the research on the Japanese court. I found this was more from an institutional perspective. And I could say this entry includes social and legal and political transformation, as well as rights, as well as identity. So it come across both these chapter theme and also the three meta cross-cutting themes which you have highlighted in the introduction. The next chapter, the next article, Professor Johnson's entry was on the death penalty in the Philippines, the war on drugs. And for this chapter, for this article, I saw the themes of social transformation, hierarchy, and power, because we addressed this research from the perspective looking at poverty, corruption, and many other graduate and sociology courses for war on drugs in the Philippines. So, and for the next two articles, I think they can come together as one category. This is Smith as well as Sapio et al. So they each look at different aspects of the criminal justice in China. One is looking at the secrecy of the death penalty regime. The other looking at overall the justice process. And I found they used very similar approach. They both used a state-centered approach and to address the political transformation in the society, particularly hierarchy and power, and also identity. And this goes on and on. And from what I observed, I think this, what you are saying, like columns and rows, right? So they come together, it's like a very beautifully knit rug for me. So they come together as an entirety, integrated a kind of organic whole to constitute the bone structure of this chapter. And before I start, I want to talk very quickly about how I think the brilliance of this book is both its coverage and its, I would say, brevity. So first is coverage. I've looked at all the chapters and I have done a counting of these different jurisdictions. And Frank can see my screen. And I found in mainland China, there are 14 different articles committed to this country, and there's equal 14 reserved for India. So these were the equal, the top of these countries. The next in order, I would say, is Japan, which have 5 different articles. And then you have kind of similar in Taiwan and also Sri Lanka and Pakistan, etc. So what I found is interesting is, although there is no specific chapter particularly committed to Central or Western Asia, like those countries are relative a little bit far away from us, but in some of the chapters, such as pluralism, and also religion, for example, discussion on Islam, they cut across all across Asia, particularly those countries as well. So I think it has a very decent coverage of almost all the locations. And going back to Frank and Professor G's point, I think already we are really expecting if you could have a second edition. If you have a second edition, and you can include many of the countries in Central Asia and West Asia, into a broadened part of the book chapter section. And brevity, the last part, I should also abide myself by this principle is, I think what I appreciate the most is the one paragraph before each of these entries. So I found those are most valuable. For example, actually, I have a picture here of the 2 chapters. One is legal mobilization, the other is about force. And I found for this small chapter before each of the relatively lengthy 3 or 4 or 5 pages of this writing, it saves me a lot of time. Right? So if I just look at this paragraph, I almost get 80 or kind of 70% of the essence of this article, which is really helpful. I mean, this is helpful, again, echoing what Professor G said, not only for researchers like us, but also for students who are making up a lot of audience in this room. So the shortcut is look closely to the digest of the editors, their comments and their commentary. The one tiny paragraph, it is tiny, but it's important. I found that include all the important points, but it also introduce some also significant points, such as how this is relevant to the broader society, not only for China, but also in other parts of Asia. And also, some of them talk about this, how this is important, not from this approach, but maybe we can look at other different methodology to be applied. From that perspective, I think this is really important and it's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. You presented the cross-cutting themes and the chapters much better than any of us could ever done ourselves. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm honored to join this panel session with esteemed scholars in the field. I would like to take this opportunity to share some of my reflections arising from a reading of this book. This is a very important work in the field of Asian law and society. I think, as we know, law as an academic discipline is value-oriented. As law as a secular rule in itself actually has no direction unless the rule links to the principles and policies that reflect and are guided by the values of the community. For its part, law and society scholarship is empirically grounded and explanatory, treating law as a social phenomenon. The publication of this book provides that with a detailed examination of what law and society scholarship is and how it has evolved in Asia. Of course, law as an academic discipline is often informed by other disciplines. For me, when I taught Chinese law subject in Hong Kong's common law setting, I often use the relevant law and society research to facilitate classroom discussions. After all, law and society research, which is empirically grounded, is intellectually complementary not only for students and jurists, but also for those who want to learn more details about the relevant social and political conditions under which the law is applied or otherwise. Among those students who have studied law in mainland China, perhaps for 4 years or more, as far as I know, many of them actually pay very little attention to the living law in China's context. A student in my class once shared with me that although she had many years of experience working as a judge in the courts of mainland China, the law and society research we discussed in the class had given her a totally new perspective. She had not previously given much thought to the social and political context in which the law is made and implemented. Excuse me. The world order has been changing rapidly since the beginning of the 21st century, as we know. In fact, the economic and the technological growth seen in Asia over the past decade had led some scholars to refer to this as the Asian century. Data has shown that roughly 60% of the world population is now in Asia, contributing more than 42% in purchasing power parity terms to the global gross domestic product. The UN recently confirmed that India is set to overtake China as the world's most populous nation by the middle of this year. India's growing population is projected to reach 1.4 to 8 billion people by the middle of this year, surpassing China's 1.4 to 5 billion. Given the increasingly, as we can see, increasingly acrimonious US-China relations, it seems less likely that the diverse Asian countries will all agree to uphold a single ideology or hegemonic culture in a post-colonial Europe. Furthermore, there are signs of growing commercial and strategic interconnectivity within Asian countries, although some of these have tended to develop a balanced friendship with the West or strategic ties with Russia and China. So in such a pluralistic Asian context, the Jewish theoretical understanding of the nature and function of law needs much clarification. In particular, in a non-liberal setting or in an authoritarian setting, the law may not genuinely serve justice, but may perhaps instead be employed as an instrument of violence or repression that is possible. The law in itself may sometimes function as a propaganda tool without any public deliberation. In light of this, it is necessary to engage in appropriate reassessment of the contextual resources on which the legal scholarship can draw. Alongside the social transformation of Asian societies, the legal systems of mainland China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, Japan, Korea, India, and many other Asian countries have gradually developed their own legal systems with their own unique features that are more suited to their own institutional logic and that differ in many respects from the traditional continental law or common law in the West. Against this background, we need a more nuanced and contextual understanding of the ways in which the law and the legal institutions function in society beyond the paradigm of modern legality. For example, the discussion in chapter 1, many scholars mentioned chapter 1 of the book focusing on religion, clearly demonstrates the necessity and significance of this kind of scholarship focusing on Asia, since the law and the religion-related issues arising in Asian context cannot be fully explained with reference to traditional Western theories and paradigms. Like other fields of knowledge, law and society research can be a significant resource on which the jurist can draw to perform the practical tasks of making law work justly. Moreover, research of this kind can help to create links between theory and relevant experience. While we are in law school, this talk is in law school. Legal education focuses not only on what the law is, but also on what it should be. Train students to think like a lawyer, as we often say, to some extent, is to equip them with the professional knowledge, and skills, how to make reasoned and convincing arguments and analysis. When lawyers engage in a reasoned way in an attempt to persuade other people, they will be more likely to understand other people's concerns if they first understand the social and the political context in which these people are located. To some extent, law and authority can clarify the context of the relevant rule of law principles and values. While, of course, law and authority research is not itself a substitute for heuristic thought, it can intellectually inform the relevant social aspects of heuristic thinking. Well, as the British scholar Caldwell said, they lead to make legal regulation socially responsive, properly informed about social conditions, and aware of popular sentiment and experience is a necessary and a fundamental concern for jurists, not just for politicians, legislators, and administrators. Again, congratulations on the publication of this book, which I believe will definitely benefit those who have an interest in understanding more about the Asian context in which the law functions in a different way from the traditional models of modern legality imposed by or transplanted from the West. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Jianhua.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sida, for the invitation. Also, all the distinguished professors audience here. To be honest, I don't really understand law and society before I read the book. Because I am a sociologist by training, although I study police, study crime, but I never regarded myself as a scholar who study law and society. And I have been curious about what is law and society, and indeed there is a definition in the book. I try to tell the audience what is not law and society, and then tell us what is law and society. And also, it's very interesting. The three authors they may never agree with each other about the definition, but they still try to provide a definition, a tentative definition about what is law and society. So actually, that reminds me of very interesting experience when I supervised a PhD and particularly master students at the University of Macau. We have a criminology program, and many students they came from a law background. And every time when they submit a thesis for me, and they always have a definition of a concept, and I always delete their definition because in sociology, in social science, we never define a concept. We study phenomena. But I think from those who came from this social legal, from law background, they always they have to define something before they can talk. So I think that is a very interesting kind of difference between law and society. I think in society, when we study society, we tend to look at a certain phenomena and certain collective issues without defining it. But I think for the legal scholars, they have to define, otherwise they cannot talk. So I think that is a very interesting phenomenon I observe. Also, I see the traces from this book, and also they have make every effort to define what is law and society. I find it so interesting. Okay, second issue I want to share is I think this is very, for me, it's a rather unconventional book because it's written in a hybrid way. And from my limited reading experience, I seldom read a book in this style. Sometimes the people wrote books of all books are their own writing. Otherwise, they combine others' writing. So I think this book is a combination. It's a hybrid. And they wrote very beautiful introduction before they introduced the classic writing. I think that is really a very unique style of writing the book. So I strongly encourage the audience to read it if you haven't read that. It's a really rewarding learning experience. And I also echo with Michelle Miao. I think about the structure of the book is really beautiful. And this 5 themes and also the 9 chapters are very beautifully weaved together. I think that is another strength of the book. Of course, the book is a huge contribution to the study of law and society. And although I study sociology, I study criminology, I do have a lot of friends that come from law background. But it's interesting, even at the University of Macau, when I talk to some legal professors, law professors, and they, although we see increasing number of publications conducted by the scholar of who study law and society, but I also sense there's a tension between traditional legal scholars and the study and the scholars who work on law and society doing empirical study. And in many occasions, and some scholars tell me, for this scholars who study law and society, they don't know about the law. They don't know about the law. They only, but I know that I'm wrong, but that is their, and I can repeat something I heard. Yes, they are doing empirical study. They publish a lot in SCI articles, but they don't know about the law. And they cannot teach in law school because they don't know about the law. But I think that is something I do here. And I sense about the tension between the scholars who hold the traditional way of legal study and those scholars who can develop law and society scholarship. So I think in that background, so I think this is really a great contribution to introduce the audience what is the law and society scholarship. And it's beautifully written. And lastly, I also would like to share about my observation about the last chapter, particularly about methodology, when scholars are doing law and society, and in particularly in some politically challenging environment. And I think one chapter that also wrote about the hostility they faced during the fieldwork. When the police, when the authority tried to keep a close eye on it. And I remember some years ago, Professor He Xin had a very beautiful article about his own reflection about his experience in Xinjiang, like the fieldwork in Xinjiang, and how the authority kind of may intervene, or how individual researchers may really feel their personal safety may endanger when doing the law and society scholarship. I think that is the last chapter is really a beautiful reading and a critical reflection about the challenges when the law and society scholars when they and also doing the research, they have to manage certain risks. Thank you very much.
And thank you for all our five speakers for the very insightful comments. And now I would like to invite questions from our audience, either people in the room or people on Zoom. For the people on Zoom, after the Q&A function, you can actually type your question into the Q&A, and I will. I would very much to be there's something I think both can respond to some of the comments, but shall we?
Maybe we can let.
Yeah, sure.
I'll
Yeah, that would be
respond to
great.
the ones I want to.
Yeah,
and
go
I'll
ahead.
give it a
Yeah,
harder
thanks.
question.
Yeah, so give the audience a little time.
Thank you very much for the 5 sets of comments. I'll just pick a few that sort of piqued my interest. The first is actually to Professor Jianhua on the challenge with defining the field of law and society. I think it's slightly different from trying to define a concept or phenomena that we see. Obviously, I think for law and society scholars, when you go out in the field, you try to understand what the nature of the field is, or how do people think about rights. It is often like what other social scientists, like the anthropologists would do. They try to understand the phenomena or the process, and then maybe you, at the end of it, informed by the data, you would try to describe or have some kind of conceptual framework for it. But I think in terms of, what is the field of law and society, is as though someone asked, what is criminology? You sort of have to find somehow a way to define it. And I think for probably 10 criminologists would have maybe different ideas. I think that's what we were sort of struggling with as well. And I think you noticed that. I want to also address Professor He Xin on the chapter structure that's actually a very challenging process. We had different variations as to how to break down the chapter. But this is the version that we ended up with. One of the considerations we had was, were there any sort of reading materials or enough sort of interest that we thought that sort of coalesced around a certain research topic, like the ones that very traditional you call on society approach, legal pluralism, disputing. To us, we see that in a lot of the research in Asia, so that was almost a no-brainer. I think the one that we sort of struggled with was the one on the court legal profession, and I think on criminal justice, and we thought that's something that some of the topics that perhaps is not so obvious in law and society in the North American context, but we see that as popular fields of research. But I'd like to address that a little bit more. In terms of the country distribution and coverage that Michelle talked about, it wasn't as though we deliberately said because China and India are larger countries who need to have the most number. It was just basically much easier to find almost anything on any topic by scholars from China or India. So we actually had a table going and we say, oh, we have so many China-based papers. We have to actually delete or take out some of that and make a lot of effort to try maybe kind of find a paper from Bangladesh or Southeast Asia or like say Indonesia that actually speaks to the same subject. So we actually we did do that, had that discussion and iterative process, dropping actually a lot of articles from Japan, India, and China.
Thank you, Lynette. I'll just follow up with addressing some of the other comments that from our speakers. I think on the topic of to what extent we're kind of trying to go beyond the U.S.-centric view of law and society and develop something different. It's actually a very challenging and delicate balance because we don't want to present the Asian law and society reader as something completely different, almost become a kind of legal orientalism, right? And then anything is not Western, anything is not American, we're going to do it that way. No, that's not possible because as Professor Cheng pointed out earlier, right? After all, if you look at the history of the sociology of law or law society, no matter how you call it, the American law and society movement from the 1960s was a very important theoretical and empirical source, I think, for anywhere in the world, right? So some of the, if you also addressing Professor Hexian's point about the chapter structure, we kind of is a mix of substantive topics and kind of theoretical approach or perspectives. Absolutely right, because some of these things we do find, for example, legal mobilization is something that actually I think the whole concept, the whole literature started from the U.S. about rights mobilization. Has a lot to do with the kind of civil rights movement in the 1960s, and the law and society movement grew out of it, right? So of course, and then it's the international literature, a body of scholarship, and also in different Asian countries, people adopt and also adapt some of these theoretical approaches to study different topics. Lynette, my co-author, actually is one of the pioneers doing this in both Singapore, Myanmar, and other Asian contexts, right? So it's really impossible, I think, to separate, oh, this is Asian, this is not Asian, or this is Western, this is not Western. It's not possible. But at the same time, we do want to present something different, something kind of, say, if like a European or American law and society scholar or social legal scholar read the book, they will find, okay, so there's something fresh or something new that they can learn. So that's kind of the balance. That's why we kind of put the religion chapter as the chapter one on purpose, just to show that kind of, highlight the importance of religion, and not just one religion, all kinds of religions, the plurality of religions across Asia, kind of how important that is for understanding Asian law and society. And colonialism, which I mentioned earlier, is another, I think, important concept. If you look at the American law and society literature, colonialism is rarely mentioned, but it's actually extremely important, not just for Asia, I think for many other parts of the world, Latin America, right? So that's, I think, something I think important to clarify. The last point I want to say that will open up, which is the Michelle's point about the geographic balance. I think Jianhua and others also mentioned this. It's actually really, we kind of made the decision early on that we will stop as South Asia. We're not going. So Afghanistan, yeah, we're not going to the Middle East because it's not there's nothing in the Middle East. Of course, there are actually a lot of scholars about war in the Middle East, but it's actually it's both too much, and also we find it kind of is hard to integrate with some other things. It's really kind of we kind of made that decision. We're going to stop somewhere. We're going to stop at Afghanistan. You're right. I mean, like we were not good. And also Central Asia, we tried very, very hard to include readings on Central Asia, but it's just very limited things out there. I mean, there are some studies on, for example, Kazakhstan or some other Central Asian countries, but they're mostly done by think tanks or some development agencies rather than kind of the kind of social science scholarship that we were looking for. So we tried our best, but we couldn't find some readers. You will have one article. But yes, but Michelle, you're right. If there's a second edition, say 10 years from now, we could possibly, if there are more scholarship emerging in Central Asia, we could do more. Like Afghanistan, for example, like Nafe actually, one of our colleague who's teaching at LSE now, he actually published quite a bit on the informal legal financial market in Afghanistan, but it's very recent. We only discovered this work kind of when the book is almost out, kind of to the publisher, right? So if there's, we do the book 3 years later, we could have included in the book. I should stop, but there's there's one more point I also want to point out, which is we're also constrained by language because this is actually big. And from very early on, the three of us actually discussed and kind of decided, this is going to be an English kind of a book based on English scholarship. Because I mean, if you think about it, of course, the best law society scholarship on Japan is in Japanese. Professor T knows this better than anybody else, right? But we didn't have the manpower, the capacity, or the language capacity to master all these. I don't know how many 30 plus languages across Asia. So we decided we're at least for this reader we're going to only use English material, which is a pity. If you look at that, as for said, if you do a law study in China reader, of course you have to include some Chinese scholarship, even the translated version of Chinese scholarship. Otherwise, you won't really reflect the entire scholarship. But we didn't have we have like 100 RAs with different language capacity, which could probably do that. But of course, now there's ChatGPT. So if there's the second edition 10 years from now, I think if AI develops to that extent, translation becomes seamless, even for scholarly writing. I think it's actually possible. I think we can dream on, and then someday that will happen. I'll stop here. And now it's open. And also for the online audience, you can type your questions in the Q&A. You haven't seen any so far.
And look for and then for the topic theme and how they fit together and how you integrated all of the different in the but what was there anything that you felt that you wanted to include and couldn't because of space constraints or for other reasons? Is there anything sort of that you wish had been included in the book or will be included in addition to broadening the geographic scope? Are there thematic areas that you would include in the next edition?
At the moment, I was taking some note that my husband was talking about other possible topics. That's something that maybe if we have to do the new edition, we might sit down and talk about. But as far as this version is concerned, I think perhaps we would have liked to include a few more excerpts, a few more articles in the chapters that we had designed. But I thought I also should share that Cambridge did tell us to keep the number of words at a certain maximum. So for pricing purposes, they had to get a certain price point, cannot be too expensive. So we had to remove some articles. I can't remember those, but we did have some discussion. We
we could have included 400 pages. We that's kind of the upper limit we were given, because otherwise it's just from the press marketing perspective it's impossible. But yeah, you want to
Also, get all copyright permission.
Yeah.
Expensive.
Right. Because we have to get copyright, from permission from unless it's a Cambridge Journal article, we don't have to. But otherwise, that's what. So there's a lot of constraints we're working with. But if there are more, we have unlimited resources, unlimited time, and no page limit. Of course, human rights, for example, can be a beautiful chapter, a very important chapter for the X edition that could happen, right? And also many other things, like for example, civil justice. Civil justice is kind of in the disputing chapter, more or less, a little bit on legal conflicts, but administrative law, which is a huge area, and also how to make sense of the state, in the context of. I think of course, it's in one of our cross-cutting themes, but we could just have a whole chapter on the state. As a matter of fact, I mean, I think our very first version for the chapter structure also respond to He comments. Was we kind of originally thought we were going to have 3 parts of the book. We call them culture, power, and politics. So these are kind of the 3 big themes. But then we start to work on each. We thought we have 3 chapters under each theme, and then we realized these things overlap too much. And then some of these it's just it's hard to distinguish. Oh, this is power, but not politics, and that is politics, not culture, power, politics framework. But there's certainly there are a lot more things that can be in the book, but it's not because of all these constraints. Thank you for the question. Yes. Yeah.
Thanks for the introduction and all of the comments. And book that is I have this book is and distributing and things like that. Of course, there are some ideas that very but I'm still wondering, there any really from the Asian places? I mean, geographically, and will it be possible for us to derive our own things?
I think this is great, but we should actually. I'd love to hear our speakers talk about this too, but you should go first.
Okay. You pass the mic to me.
Yeah.
I think Sida just now has sort of talked about how the reader is in a way to resonate and build bridges with law and society feel writ large. So we deliberately did not want to have chapters that looked very exotic or very uniquely Asian. And to be, scholars working in Asia have taken these concepts and ideas from North American theory and given their own conceptualized or reconceptualized. Scholarship is not this one way, like as we talked about in the introduction, a one-directional influence. I think that scholars, like all of us here working in the field of law and society, also engage with scholars beyond Asia, and so that this is sort of a back and forth circular kind of interaction. So I actually don't. The distinctive view in itself, but at the same time, you can have conversations with law and society in China, in Indonesia, or in other Asian contexts, and beyond that as well.
Yeah. So in terms of I'd love to actually hear our speakers talk about this, especially Professor Ji. Like, what would be a Japanese book that reader look like in terms of the themes and topics? What would be anything not in the book a reader, but actually would be in the Japanese?
那个，我觉得就是从这个角度看，我想有一个是非常明确的，就是现代化过程中如何克服传统，这个在很长时间内一直是日本法社会学研究的一个非常重要的主题。那么在传统的文化当中，如何使现代的法律制度有效地发挥功能？这个是他们研究的一个主题。但是在亚洲其他国家，包括日本，在90年代以后发生了一些微妙的变化。刚才在这个听众提问中，大家有人谈到，比如说我们出这个书的目标是什么？它对世界这个法语社会学术界的贡献是什么？这就是为什么呢？我在这个开始要谈到法律历史研究的这个价值所在，因为日本的这个法社会学界对国际法社会学的一个重要贡献，就是把法律意识研究作为一个研究领域确立了，这个是日本的一个非常重要的贡献。当然，这个时候呢，我们可以看到，它范式呢是以移植的法律与传统法律相对立，然后呢，如何克服传统的这个法律意识，使它推动法律改革，是这样一个目标。但是呢，90年代以后呢，大家越来越从这个就是自身的文脉中来理解。那这个时候呢，法律意识以及从这个法律意识中生成出来的秩序原理，就成为亚洲法哲学研究的一个非常重要的方面。我认为这两方面都很重要。如果我们过于强调传统的这个文化的话，它可能会滑向保守主义、文化保守主义。毕竟我们要推动法律制度的现代化。但是另外一方面，我们也要看到，在亚洲这样一个巨大的社会中，这么复杂的多元的这个文化当中，一定有它独特的秩序原理。我们如何发现它、表述它？这个应该是亚洲法语社会研究对世界学术界的一个贡献。
Yeah, thank you for your clarity. I just want to follow up and say that this is actually a very big topic. It actually almost corresponds to colonialism. The other side of colonialism is modernization, right? Because I think for most of the Asian countries, if you look at the history for the past 100 years, modernization is always in the mind of the legal reformers, political leaders, and ordinary people, kind of how to modernize the society, how to change for something better, no matter we talk about legal institutions or the legal profession or the courts or other parts of the legal system, criminal justice system, of course. Yeah, but how does that actually make the Asian law studies scholarship or the Japanese one or the Chinese one or the Indian one actually different from the kind of the Western one? I think that's actually a very hard question. That's why we eventually, we originally actually, to be honest, we planned for a chapter called just law and state transformations or something like that. But eventually we thought it's better to be put as a cross-cutting theme, legal and political transformation with them, without putting it as a chapter in itself. Because everything, almost everything you can think about, like about Asian law society, even Japan, you often consider the most modern, most kind of advanced economy in Asia, still kind of modernization, as Professor Ji talked about, has been the kind of constantly in the mind of the legal scholars, law reformers, and law society scholars. Okay, so I'd love to hear also our other speakers any thoughts about what could potentially be in the book that's kind of Asian or reflecting something different from the American or the kind of Western law society. But any thoughts?
Not really.
You turn it off.
I think American method to study Asian conflicts that does not constitute legal orientalism per se, right? So simply because the method is invented in the United States, and then a lot of topics have been tendency. I mean, how to use those methods, what's the value? Then so I don't think that should be but of course there will be some unique aspect. I mean, we may try to explore and then see if it is possible to go beyond established by our forerunners in the United States. That's really challenging, and so that's exactly what we are doing, exploring the uniqueness of legal consciousness in Japan, in China, and also the other aspect of culture. So I think, and he also as well the legal and political institutions as well. I think that's the task for all of us in this way. Anyone else?
Other thoughts? No? Okay, then other question. Yes, Cynthia. Cynthia in the back.
Hey, Cynthia.
My question is, as a follow-up to the method discussion, one of the things that I particularly found difficult in sort of law and society work is to perhaps, I mean, I work in the South Asian context, and often certain methodologies, when you're trying to publish in sort of the Northern Academy, that method wouldn't make sense just because the data is very difficult to extract in particular ways. And so, I mean, we've had this difficulty with the Law and Society Review in the past. So I'm just wondering, in the book, which I'm looking forward to read, which I'm also really excited about because I think for the first time South Asia and sort of larger Asia is together, and often that's on scale. So that's really exciting. Thank you for that. So I'm just wondering if you shed any light on the methods discussion in that respect, how sort of law and society and data method can look very different in different.
So maybe I should share a little bit as to how we went about constructing the chapter, which is number 9 on methodology. We call it Practicing Law and Society Asia. What we did was we deliberately featured the methods discussion or appendices of the articles or book chapters that we feature in the substantive chapters ahead, like for instance, Professor He and Weidong, they have this book about courts, the graduate courts in China. So we featured an excerpt from their book, but we also featured an excerpt from the appendix about how they did the research in chapter 9, and from there the idea or the message that we're trying to convey is access to some places like courts or access to an archive in your case may be difficult, may be sporadic, or may not be systematic. So this is how these folks who have been very successful with their research and publication can manage to navigate. We don't really offer answers because every case and every kind of research design is different, but we just hope that to have that chapter sort of as a to build a sense of community and sort of start a conversation around that. So I'm afraid that chapter will not shed definite answers for you, but to let people realize that everyone else struggles with access and use and collection of data in Asian context, or perhaps broader context in different ways, but similarly there are challenges. And also, you know, by sharing that chapter, I also feel that perhaps readers outside of Asian law society would then realize that not every place keep track of court records systematically where you can just sort of extract all the data and just run an analysis. So that's sort of my way to address your question.
Any other comments on methodology and unique challenges about methodology in Asia?
Yeah, criminology is the important field.
Of course, I think all our scholars who are doing this empirical study in different contexts, they will face all kinds of different challenges. And actually, we just published an article together with Wei Shuai. Together, we talk about doing criminology and ethnography in China. What are the challenges? and we do reflect, systematically reflect some type of challenges. Of course, the most difficult one is the political sensitivity. I think that is the most difficult one. Everybody have to face, and particularly over the past decade, we see the political environment has become more and more conservative, and that is not good for us to do the empirical research in China. I think that is definitely, and then the cultural sensitivity and the different culture, when we do have different understanding of the culture, and that is also another challenge. Because we have access to data, we have ethical issues. We always have ethical issues. And the IRB is always difficult to deal with, right? And many of us may have a very headache experience with the IRB, right? And also so on and so forth. But at the same time, we also are also quite optimistic about the future. Even if we have faced a lot of tension, a lot of difficulty, I think the need for new knowledge is still there. And also, I'm a rather optimistic person. We always find more ways than difficult to do. I think the most important is that you have the passion, you have the drive. You want to do that, and then you will find a way to do that. I think that is particularly although we see the overall political environment may be very challenging for many of us, but we do see the increasing number of empirical research in criminology, in law and society scholarship. We see the scholarship is growing. I think that is the best evidence to show to be optimistic. Yes, there are challenges, but they are more scholars there. We have more PhD students than never before, right? And they need to do research, and the bar for publication and the requirement for publication is become higher and higher. I think this also become the drive for us to do more empirical research. Of course, we cannot estimate the challenge, but I think there are always better ways to do so. Thank you.
Yes, Martin. Over here, the lady first. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the introduction and all the comments. I really learned a lot this afternoon. And my question regards to, as I haven't finished this book yet, and I read the syllabus on my computer. And this book really provides a very valuable reference for the law and society study in Asia. But as I noticed that there are very light comparative studies, and I wonder if you select this purposefully or because there are just light comparative study in this area. And I wonder, is there any difficulties in doing this kind of comparative study? Also, I'm especially interested in the 5 cross-cutting themes, as Professor Jiao has mentioned in the beginning. And I think those 5 cross-cutting themes seem to be quite unique as in the circle of Asia law and society study. And I think there are a lot of things that we can further dig into in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. The first comment is actually very important. I think you're right that we actually didn't include many comparative studies about multiple countries or jurisdictions. I think I can't think of a reason why we didn't do that. I think it's just because we kind of the way we think about it, like for each topic, for example, legal consciousness or courts or criminal justice, we want to represent different jurisdictions, right? We also want to represent different topics. We never just, it didn't just ring a bell to us that, we should maybe include a few comparative study of like 3 different countries or something like that. But of course, there's a lot of excellent law study scholars in Asia actually are comparative studies. Like Lynette is like doing one of them right now. So want to come.
All I would say it wasn't a deliberate choice.
Yeah, it just happened.
You pointed it out.
Yeah, it just like it did before we went out. It never came to my mind that okay, yeah, we didn't actually include that, but that's a second edition. Second edition. Yeah, and what's the other question? Sorry. Oh, the cross-cutting theme. I don't entirely agree with you. I think some of the cross-cutting themes are not just uniquely Asian; they're more general, like hierarchy and power, for example. Of course, it's like universal, right? Of course, it manifests differently in Asia sometimes. For example, there is a caste system India, South Asia, like that kind of hierarchy might not exist in some other places. But the theme of hierarchies and power, I think, is much more universal than some other things. Like, for example, I think legal and political transformations is not unique to Asia, but I think it's actually a lot more prominent in the Asian context than in some of the other contexts, like the Western European or North American context. We have maybe the last question, then we'll move to the reception.
Right. Well, thank you, distinguished panelists, for this discussion on this amazing book. I guess my question is, how do you reflect on the speed at which these topics update itself? So backing on the, if you look at tech, machine learning is making progress on every front, every month, maybe every week. And the publishing process is simply not designed for that speed of update. But how about this book? So is it more of scholars arguing back and forth on simple couple of fundamental topics, or is it more of one's training shift every couple of years? Do you feel the urge of publishing another edition?
Great question. It is a constant struggle, actually. As I said, when we're in the process of putting together the book, there are like new publications every month, right? So like the way we thought about it is like there's no way we can be always up to date, right? And especially given the fact that, as a matter of fact, Asian Law Society as the academic field is growing very, very rapidly. Partly thanks to Professor Weidong, founded the Asian Journal of Law Society, which published 3 issues every year now. Excellent scholarship. So there are actually a lot more to choose from today than, say, 10, 50 years ago. 50 years ago, we might not have enough materials for a book like this, right? But today there are actually a lot more materials. So the way we thought of it is like every chapter we try to lay out the fundamentals, kind of the baselines for the kind of issue. For example, you want to think about religions or legal consciousness or different topics in Asia. These are the different things, and some of the articles are more classic than others, right? There are articles we use, published in the 70s or the 80s. They're the real classics, right? And some of the new things might become classics in 20 years, right? So we try to pick the excellent scholarship to the best of our ability. But of course, I'm sure actually. Go back to Michelle's suggestion whether there's a second edition down the road. It's entirely possible. Like some of you, I think once you become, a more senior scholar, you can do the second edition, third edition. You can do a law study reader in China, in Japan, and different kind of national contexts or jurisdictions. I think it's entirely possible. There actually, let me say this. I always have an ambivalent attitude about this, but there's a burgeoning scholarship. Publications every month, because there's a proliferation of journals, so which is a good thing, I think, generally speaking. But also it produces, uneven quality of scholarship. I think that's the best way I can put it. So it makes the editor's job much harder. You have to pick the good ones, but you have to read a lot more, in the first place. So, but I think in general it's a good thing. So we have more things to choose from, even today compared to 4 or 5 years ago when we started to put together. Okay, so now it's 5:30. We should move to the reception. I just want to say one thing before we move to the reception, which I think would make our Cambridge University Press editor very unhappy, which is if you're interested in getting the book, there are 2 ways you can get it. First, you can get it for free through a Cambridge core, which the University of Hong Kong Library, and I'm sure most academic libraries in the world subscribe to. The book can be downloaded for free. So for those people, especially students, you don't have to spend the time, on the book if you want to. And then my editor will show me somewhere, screaming, I think somewhere. Anyway, but if you actually want to get a paperback of the book, you can easily, you can buy it on Amazon. But we also have flyers. I think when you enter the room, there's a desk with flyers. You can get a 30% off if you want to actually get a physical copy. I'm old style. I actually find the physical copy easier to read than the e-version, but I think the younger generation have moved on. But anyway, so thank you so much. I want to thank all our 5 speakers for this conference. Thanks all of you. And we have some coffee and snacks on either back, and all of us will hang out for another maybe half an hour, 25 minutes. So we're happy to chat more informally. Thank you so much.